We're back. You already know what time it is. It's R3's time, where we read. I'm Naila. I'm your CEO and your founder of R3, where eyes, where lives, realize, where we promote knowledge of self through education and activism. And what better way to do that than to read, write, and comprehend for your own understanding? So, of course, we're jumping right into it. If you notice, my background is a little bit different. I am on a cruise ship. For R3, we read regardless rain, sleet, travel, or snow, and even on the go. We read. So we're jumping right into it. We are still reading West Africa and Islam by Peter B. Clarke. Excellent book, excellent novel so far, with a comprehensive approach to how Islam was brought to West Africa. Now, last week we talked a lot about the social construct of not only religion, but the foundations of it being something that was created in society for political means, personal endeavors as well. And it also was something that was brought in with the elite groups. Although the people in inland places and, the poorer folks, they would say, had Islam already, we started to see it being picked up by these elite people, using it as a source of control and power over others. So it's really interesting as we dive deep of how Islam impacted Africa and the different tribes and communities as well along the way. Because remember, Africa is a continent with many countries, and we're just so happen to talk about West Africa. So I'm going to pass it over to our hostess with the Moses, see if she can holler for $1 and say something while she's over here, and then we'll be back.
Hey, this is Howard Soul hostess Moses coming at you from the Real Lives Book Club, where we promote knowledge of self through education and activism. We are here to give you a super overview of, can they hear me? Oh, sorry, of West Africa and Islam by Peter Clarke. And we are going over chapter 6 or 5. No,
Six.
doing a summary of chapter 6. And Peter Clarke explains that Islam spread across West Africa in the 19th century, mainly through peaceful means like trade, education, spiritual leadership. Muslim traders and clerics introduced the religion as they moved through the region, offering the literacy of law and connection. Local rulers and elites often embraced Islam for its social and economic benefits. Marabouts, Muslim teachers, played a major role by teaching the Quran, building mosques, and living among communities. Islam's flexibility allowed it to blend, and the local customs helping it gain acceptance. Sufi brotherhoods like the Qadara and the Tijaniya were spread Islam through spiritual teachings and community ties. Clarke highlights this for the peaceful transition that spread helped Islam to deeply rooted West African life. And it's ironic that we're talking about this book now, and the Pope died the other day, who a lot of people saw as a progressive Pope and a leader in the community that's tried to spread his message. Even though I don't always agree with it, but he tried to spread his message as much as he could through forgiveness, love, and acceptance of people where they are, not trying to mold people into this little clay building, the glass jar that people want. R3 Realize, you can get Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and a website where you can like, share, and follow for free. And back to you, kid.
All right. So we're just going to be reading a little bit from the peaceful penetration of Islam in West Africa in the 19th century. This is chapter 6. So we're not going to go over so many highlights. I'm just going to kind of read the beginning of it for you to give you a summary of it. And of course, you're supposed to read all of chapter 5 and introduction to chapter 6 as we wrap up this book. But we're going to go ahead and begin. So in much of West Africa in the 19th century, the quietest Pacific approach to the spread of Islam persisted. This was the case in the southwestern Sahara, the Borno, the forest and coastal zones, and the Volta Basin. This is not to say that these areas were not in any way affected by militant Islamic reform movements in the Volta Basin region. For example, the Boromo region northwest of Kumasi, a certain Al-Hajjaj Mahmoud Carrington waged a jihad of the sword in 1860s. Moreover, Muslims in the southwestern Sahara, Borno, Ashanti, the Yoruba land, and the Volta Basin were indirectly affected by the jihads in Hazaland, the Senegambia, and the upper and middle Niger regions. On the whole, however, Islam in the parts of West Africa discussed in this chapter, where it did expand in an attempt to change society, did so by the use of pacific means. Even in certain cases, these means were dictated by circumstances rather than the principle or doctrine. Islam in the southwestern Sahara, or is also called the Shinkites or Mauritania, which we learned in the first few chapters. In the 19th century, in the part of the Western Sahara, which today forms the Islamic Republic of Mauritania, a number of developments took place which assisted with the growth and expansion of Islam both in the region itself and beyond its frontiers. There was, for instance, what one scholar has termed a Zawaye, the Renaissance, which consisted in the emergence of a remarkable series of Arabic scholars who drew political and spiritual strength from the Maghreb, the Northwest Africa, and the Arab East, whose grasp of Arabic was to be a precious legacy for Moorish generations to come. And Mauritania gets its name also from the Moors, the Moorish. Among the outstanding and influential Mauritanian Muslim scholars and religious leaders of the period were the Sidi, the Abdallah, B. al-Hajj Ibrahim of Tajika, Sheikh Sadia al-Kabir, founder of the Islamic University at Boutalimet in southern Mauritania and promoter of the Qadiriya Brotherhood, and Muhammad al-Hafiz B. Mukhtar, who established the Tijaniya Brotherhood in Mauritania. There was also the scholar and leader of the resistance movement against the French imperialism, Sheikh Ma'al Yanayan of Samara, and what was formerly the Spanish Sahara, and part of which was until August 1978 claimed by Mauritania. These scholars and others, building on the tradition of scholarship dating back to many centuries, made Islam in the 19th century an even stronger intellectual, political, economic, social, and religious force in the southwestern Sahara and beyond. Here I will limit myself to a consideration of the work and the impact of the Sheikh Sadia al-Kabir, leaving to the next chapter a discussion of the jihad of the Sheikh Ma'al Ayanayan of Samara. I will consider in this section the development and impact of the Qadiriya and the Tijaniya brotherhoods of Mauritania in the 19th century. So it goes on to talk about the Sheikh Sadia al-Kabir, the Great, his name was, also in 1775 to 1868. So we should have actually we should have all finished that and read there as well. We're going to jump over to page 164. And I just want to read a little bit about Islam and the traditional art in West Africa. So it says the Quran, the Hadith, the body of transmitted actions and sayings of the Prophet Muhammad, give the Muslim position with regard to imagery and art forms in general. Al-Bukhari's and other sound collections of the Hadith state quite clearly that image and idol makers will be punished. And there are many instances in West African history where Muslims, following this guidance, have collected together and publicly burnt images and idols or ordered their destruction. The four orthodox schools, the Madahib of Islamic law, and the Hanafi, and the Shafi'iyya, and the Hanbali, and the Maliki schools give very little attention to the question of representational art. Although generally speaking they follow the position outlined in Hadith, some Muslim scholars, however, have interpreted the teachings of the Quran and the Hadith and of schools of law or representational art and imagery to mean that the making of a representation in itself is not forbidden, but what it is absolutely forbidden is the worship of images, idols, or representations of any sort. Shehu Umar of Borno, son and successor of the Al-Kanimi, provided us with an explanation of Islamic doctrine concerning representational art. In July 1870, he was presented with gifts from the king of Prussia by the German traveler Gustav Nachtigal. Among the gifts was a mantelpiece clock decorated with a lightly clad allegorical figure and 3 life-size portraits of the king of Prussia. How you say that? Yeah, Prussia, one of the queen, and the third of the crown prince. The Nachtigal realized were, in his own words, quote unquote, in contradiction to the tenets of Islam. The Nachtigal explained to Shehu Umar, who incidentally for this audience had removed the litham which is the veil, something he rarely did, that the king of Prussia had sent these portraits because he himself could not visit Umar and met him in person. The Shehu, a sensitive prince, was a little concerned, but in the most admirable way, explained what it is the view constituted Islamic teaching or on representational art. He said to the Nachtegel, I myself know well that Islam condemns only those representations of the human form which are produced in a way which enables a shadow to be cast, statues or pictures in relief, for example, a picture drawn on flat paper or smooth canvas. However, it is not classified in this category of sins. The Shehu was in fact summarizing the teachings of the Maliki school, the one most widely followed in West Africa, on the subject of representational art. It is known from the correspondence between the Al-Makili and the Asikia Muhammad, from the writings of Usman Dan Fadil on the state of religion in Hazuland before the jihad, from Al-Kanini's correspondence with the Sokoto, and from Al-Hajjaj Umar Tal's discoveries in the Bambara states, that both the interpretation of Islamic doctrine on representational art given by the Shehu Umar and the teaching of the Quran and the Hadith on this subject were at times ignored in West Africa. The Muslim communities west of the Black Volta River have shown great tolerance towards indigenous representational art, and in some instances have even contributed to the maintenance and development. In the Banduku and the Ivory Coast, for example, Muslims have not only practiced in the Jiban cult and anti-witchcraft masking tradition, but have also generally assumed positions of responsibility and control over this cult. There are other making traditions in this area, such as the Du tradition, which it is believed that is Muslim in inspiration. The Du masquerade, moreover, is said to be ultimately tied to Islamic holy days and the Muslim functionaries. Some of the mosques, moreover, used in the Du masquerade have been carved by Muslims. So that's just a little bit about the artwork as well. It goes on to say on page 165 to wrap up, there have been, on the other hand, Muslim in the Banduku who have objected to Muslims practicing in non-Muslim masquerades on the grounds that such participation at whatever level is contrary to Islamic teaching. But even these Muslims do not condemn participation in a Du masquerade, which is considered to be Islamic in inspiration, where some of the mosques are in the form of human faces and contain scarification marks. Two of the principal occasions on which the Du masquerade is performed are the end of Ramadan and the festival of Eid al-Kabir. This tolerance, at times approval of aspects of indigenous representational art, shown that the Muslim Dayula in the Ivory Coast and Ghana has parallels elsewhere in Africa. It indicates not only that some Muslims were and are prepared to accept elements of the non-Islamic culture and the environment surrounding them, but they also help to maintain, shape, and develop aspects of the artistic and cultural life of West Africa. The above comments are worth bearing in mind when we come to discuss the Islamic reaction to traditional culture in Nigeria in the 1970s. So yeah, we're just kind of reading around here, but this is chapter 6. And it's the powerful penetration of Islam. So it came in many ways, like we said, social, political, but it also came in a way of art as well. And, infiltrating those type of arts of the indigenous people and their foundations, and then calling it, paganism is the words we always hear and stuff like that when you're worshiping many idols. And I mean, this portion even talks about how not being able to place something on a sheet of paper because it has no 3D form, but it not placing it as a worshiping idol on a 3D piece of paper. So it talked about the queen that they put on this paper. And so I really I like when I see that art is usually used. It was actually primarily used, especially in the United States, political cartoons as a form of art in order to sway people of their position and convince them of, that slavery was good for other options, but you also see in a religion, and then recently too, going to Ethiopia, now that I think about it, and then walking in some of those very old churches that are very orthodox, and, they have similar styles to Islam. Taking off your shoes, bowing, covering your head for the women, not wearing makeup, things like that. But I did find that a lot of the artwork there were painted in a different skin tone and color than those in Ethiopia. And it's because of that proximity to other people's culture that we always seem to have now in Africa, but across the diaspora, but also the lightening of the skin tone in order for it to seem possibly like more purity. But I notice how art is used as a political tool as well. So I just wanted to put those two things out there. And then let's see. Okay, really quick on page 170, this subtitle was called, let's see if I can find it. Islam in the forest zone and the coastal regions of West Africa. So it says, by the beginning of the 19th century, there were only a few relatively small Muslim communities in Yoruba land in places like the Oyo, the Ilorin, the Bagadiri, Eep, and Lagos. These communities consisted in the main of Muslim merchant missionaries and the slaves from Hazaland, Borno, and further north. Many of the slaves had escaped from their masters, and according to one count, some of them branded together to constitute a formidable force of about 20,000 who annoyed the whole country. Islam in Yoruba land in the first half of the 19th century, for much of the second half of the same century, was a minority religion with little organization and cohesion. It was also regarded as a threat to the existing political and cultural system. It was a threat in the sense that the body of knowledge, beliefs, and practices which is brought with it into Yoruba land were considered to be both irrelevant and to constitute a danger to the existing and generally accepted Yoruba views on politics, art, religion, and education. The Yoruba, who can be divided into a number of subgroups such as the Ijebu, the Oyo, the Ikiti, and the Ondu, and the Egbi, and the Egbado, and others, were to an extent unified by the belief that there were descendants of the Oduduwa of Ife, who in some of the myths is present both as a primordial divinity and a deified ancestor. They also believe in the supreme being known by a number of names such as the Olodumare, the Olorun, the Ile, and others. The supreme being, moreover, was regarded as being, among other things, the creator, as unique, immortal, omnipotent, omniscient, and transcendent, and king and judge. This belief in the supreme being and other interrelated beliefs, practices, and rituals, according to one historian, permitted the whole fabric of the Yoruba life and culture. Moreover, the Yoruba peoples believe, like many other peoples in Africa and elsewhere, that their strength, welfare, to an extent survival, were linked with those close, correct, and continual observance of their traditional beliefs and practices. As we have seen, the Maasai took a similar view with regard to the survival of their own political and social system. Islam was also seen as a threat to stability and independence in Yoruba land because of its association with what has been termed as the Ilorin imperialism. Ilorin in the northern Yoruba land was incorporated in the Sokoto Caliphate and thereby became a part of Dar es-Salaam and the land of Islam in the first half of the 19th century. The first steps in this process of incorporation into the Dar es-Salaam were taken from the Ofanja, the Ara One Kankanfo, the leader of the Oyo forces, staged a revolt against the Alafin, ruler of the Oyo Empire, whose capital was at Oyo Ele, home Oyo, in the northeastern Yoruba land. Oyo, a strong power in the northern Yoruba land as early as the 14th century, went on to establish its authority not only over much of Yoruba land to the south, but also over the parts of Nupe land and the Borgu to the north, and over other parts of Benin, the Dahomey, to the west and southwest. However, during the 18th century, Oyo suffered a number of military defeats, for example, at the hands of the Borgu in 1783 and the Nupe in the 1791, and started to decline. So that is the chapter about the peaceful penetration of Islam in the 19th century. Peaceful, but I would like to call it like covert, because they're entering in under these guise that they're being peaceful. But again, we're taking away indigenous spirituality practices and the worship of their ancestors, or the acknowledgement, the honor, really, I should call it, of their ancestors. And we're creeping in slowly, and we're changing ways, and we're influencing with not only politics and the social life, but also with art. So I just seen that chapter as very interesting. So I'm going to end it there. And remember, you guys, continue to read chapter 6. And remember, R3 will read regardless. Travel, sleep, rain, snow, or on the go. Go ahead and jump over to chapter 19. This will bring us into the 1900s and the 1960s, where this chapter is called Colonial Rule, an era of rapid expansion and development. So we're going to start to see how Islam starts to spread. It enter in through West Africa, and it's specifically Mauritania, which is the name that it gets after the Moors. But then it starts to rapidly spread throughout the continent, and that's why we see it primarily in the northern area of Africa today. And then we start to see different other religions a little bit further at the bottom, but we started to really see the spread in chapter 7. So make sure you tune in. I'm Naila. I'm your CEO and your founder of R3. We're Eyes, We're Lives, Real Lives, where we read every Tuesday at 3. Well, every Tuesday at 6:30 for now, but usually at 3, but you can catch us Tuesday regardless. I'm going to pass it to our hostess with the Moses. She's going to wrap us up, and I will see you next week.
How was so, hostess with Moses, coming at you, Real R3 Book Club, where we promote my knowledge itself. This West Africa and Islam by Peter Clarke, and we are going over how Islam has spread through West Africa. We're here every Tuesdays, rain, shine, sleet, or snow, or ship. You will go. Get us at R3 Realize, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, as well as a website where you can like, share, and follow for free. We do accept donations, and we appreciate your donation. We appreciate your likes and shares also. But if you could donate to any of our campaigns, we really appreciate that. So get online, donate, like, share, and follow. We got a lot of views, but we need a lot of follows. So see you next Tuesday, and we're out. Back to you, Kia.
All right. Don't forget, we're reading chapter 7. Wrap up chapter 6, which is the peaceful penetration of Islam in the 19th century. And then make sure you jump into chapter 7, the 1900s to 1960 colonial rule, an era of rapid expansion and the development. So we start to see different colonial policies in West Africa. We start to see that infiltration in West Africa and the colonization of it as well. I'm Naila, your CEO and your founder of R3, We're Eyes, We're Lives, Real Lives, where we promote knowledge itself through education and activism. Peace, or we say 3.
There is